A movie that should have won the Best Picture Oscar is my pick for the third best movie of the decade.
You miss her, don't you?
She's gone.
What if she isn't? What if she's still here?
Grandma, Susie's in the in-between.
From the afterlife, a teenage girl watches over her family and her killer in The Lovely Bones. I'm Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm A.O. Scott of the New York Times. Our first movie, The Lovely Bones, takes a horrific subject, the brutal, senseless murder of a 14-year-old girl, and tries to turn it into something other than a grim, depressing story. And like the best-selling book on which it's based, the film almost succeeds. Director Peter Jackson uses a full palette of rich color, lush music, and astonishing visual effects, both digital and traditionally cinematic, to infuse this potentially grisly material with romance, humor, and magic.
Ready?
Yeah.
Now hold her steady.
Okay.
Okay, shipmate, take it away. That is the thing of beauty.
Saoirse Ronan, a spookily self-assured young actress, is Susie Salmon, whose normal suburban life is cut short one day in 1973 by a serial-killing neighbor played by Stanley Tucci. Her parents, Mark Wahlberg and Rachel Weisz, prove unable to soothe each other's grief, and a boozy grandma, played by Susan Sarandon, doesn't help much either.
Look, you're not coping, okay? Len's worried, I'm worried. Your mother offered to help.
You invited her here?
Darling.
Hello, Mother.
Watch there, sweetheart. Oh, look at you. Are you eating?
Is this all of it?
Don't be ridiculous. That's just my makeup.
Susie watches them all from a place in the afterlife that's called the In-Between. It's rendered as a CGI wonderland of flying topiary, ships and bottles, and an enchanted gazebo. It's like Teletubbyland, but weirder. There is a lot to look at in this movie, and there are some brilliantly executed, suspenseful set pieces. The problem is that Jackson and the screenwriters, Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens, haven't figured out a coherent approach to the story. The Lovely Bones is a hodgepodge of feeling without a solid emotional core. There's not enough art here to make it a must-see, but there is just enough craft to make it worth renting.
Tony, you've hit every reason why this is, in fact, a skip it. I think this is a case of a miscast director. Peter Jackson, best known for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the King Kong remake. You know, in this project, The Lovely Bones, he has to create a series of worlds that suggest the afterlife, the in-between, as you say, heaven, and I think he just simply smothers this human element of the story with too much of this. It's not a matter of just using CGI, computer-generated effects.
No.
You have to with this kind of demand in the story, but I just feel like the people get lost, and yet the tone of this picture is so determinedly affirmative, it sort of plays false to me.
Well, I didn't quite think that. I mean, I thought that there was also a problem with the screenwriting. That is that, you know, this is a big, rich novel, and the real heart of the novel, what gives it its title, is all of the relationships between the other characters, among them, that happen in Susie's absence, that she looks down on.
Right.
And I think that the screenwriters were not tough enough with themselves when it came to choosing which stories to tell. So there's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, some stuff about the mom, some stuff about the friends, some stuff about the killer. But I did find that it was so visually interesting and rich that I was in the movie. I felt sort of emotionally detached from it. It didn't produce the strong feelings that I think it wants to.
You didn't find it visually suffocating?
No, I didn't. I found it emotionally distanced and visually fascinating.
No, I think the actors struggle to be found in this story. And it's heartbreaking because the book is, you know, the writing of the book, lovely, and the movie reduces everything to simple plot points for me. So, okay, next movie. I don't know anyone who doesn't like Colin Firth. The co-star of Love Actually and the Bridget Jones comedies may be best known for his work in this lighter vein, but he's equally convincing in dramas, drawing you into his characters' interior lives. Firth has the role of a lifetime in A Single Man, and he responds with a heartbreaking performance. Set in 1962, Santa Monica, it's about a college English professor near the end of his rope. He's grieving the loss of his longtime lover, played by Matthew Good, in flashback. This was at a time and place in America when being gay meant negotiating a series of hidden lives within one life.
By the time I've dressed and put the final layer of polish on the now slightly stiff but quite perfect George, I know fully what part I'm supposed to play.
A Single Man comes from a novel by Christopher Isherwood, and he based his character in A Single Man partly on himself. Another Londoner living in Los Angeles is Charlotte, George's long-ago lover, played by Julianne Moore.
You never really did take me seriously, did you, George?
I tried to, Charlie, I remember. A long time ago. It didn't really work out, did it? No, Charlie.
She's never quite found her footing in America or sorted out her feelings for George. A Single Man was freely adapted from the 1964 Isherwood novel by co-writer and director Tom Ford, who's a former fashion designer. And what's remarkable about this film is how it doesn't look fashion designery, at least not at the expense of the human element. It's a strong and very moving character study, and I suspect Firth will get a well-deserved Oscar nomination. See it, for a lot of reasons.
See, this is a wonderful movie. I mean, the filmmaking, it's amazing that this is a first-time filmmaker, because he does something very difficult and very, I think, exquisite in this movie, which is to convey a character's emotions that he's not expressing himself. He uses a beautiful musical score, he uses flashbacks and montage to convey this man's inner state, and there's something about this movie that just captures the rhythm of life. It also captures this particular predicament of being a gay man in America in the early 1960s. I mean, you think of it, we tend to think of it now as either, you know, in or out of the closet, but it's a much more complicated and nuanced life that this guy is living.
Firth is so good about just conveying all these different emotions, and he's an actor, unlike many good actors, who can hit 3 or 4 emotional notes at once, where you get just all these different things, and you really know what's ticking in the guy's brain.
Yeah, and you see the way that he's, you know, the kind of buttoned-up professor. One of the best portrayals, by the way, of an English professor that I think I've ever seen in a movie, and also the way he shows different parts of himself to different people.
And Julianne, we should mention Julianne Moore before we. She's, you know, the relationship we see in this picture is very much like Sally Bowles in Cabaret, where you have, you know, a relationship that is not meant to be for a lot of reasons, but the two of them marvelous together.
Terrific movie. Coming up next, a new Disney princess from down New Orleans way. It's The Princess and the Frog.
And later we've reached our number 3 picks for the top 10 movies of the decade.
I suppose you want a kiss.
Kissing would be nice, yes?
With our next movie, The Princess and the Frog, Disney tries to show that they can still make them like they used to. Lavish, two-dimensional animated features, that is, with musical flights of fancy and updated fairy tale plots. The princess this time is Tiana, a young African-American woman living in early 20th century New Orleans, working hard and following her dream.
Ain't got time for messing around, and it's not my style.
I want some grandkids.
This old town can slow you down, people taking the easy way. But I know exactly where I'm going. I'm getting closer and closer every day.
One fine day, a handsome prince comes to town, and fate intervenes in the form of some voodoo that turns both him and Tiana into jumpy green amphibians. They head for the bayou where, wouldn't you know it, they acquire a couple of sidekicks, one of them a trumpet-playing alligator named Louis.
Oh, Louis, give anything to be up there jamming with the big boys.
Why don't you?
Oh, I tried once.
That character and a few of the others walk a bit close to the stereotype line, but insensitivity is not the problem here. Lack of imagination is. Most of The Princess and the Frog looks more like one of Disney's straight-to-DVD sequels than like their animated classics, and the few big, fun musical set pieces are brought down by second-rate songwriting. If you have a young daughter, as I do, you're probably going to see this anyway, but my heavy-hearted, grown-up advice is to skip it.
No, I like it a little better than that. I would say rent it, because I think the animation style, which is, you know, proudly old-fashioned, is satisfying in many ways, and I think a lot of people are, in fact, waiting for a story like this that has an African-American, you know, palette for once in the princess arena, and the setting of the story. You know, you're dealing very naturally with, you know, Creoles and all kinds of ethnic sort of diversity issues. It's good. That works. The script lets everybody down, and it is too bad.
It's a problem. I mean, I saw this with my daughter, who's 10, and she said 2 very astute things to me, which I'll hear, you know, steal from her. One was, you know, she said, this movie can't figure out what it's trying to be, and it's true. It's so busy. You know, there's not one but 2 goofy comical sidekicks. There's a plot that just sort of zigs and zags and never finds the romantic fullness that you want to get from a movie like this.
And what's her other?
The other thing she said was, this movie tries way too hard to make you like it, and I think that is really on the money, and it just kind of assaults you with its
And the first half hour, I thought, my God, this thing is never going to calm down, and then I do think it does finally relax in the middle, and that's when I started to at least like it, not love it, enough to rent it, I think.
didn't like the frogs either. I thought the frogs looked really kind of wimpy.
Well, there you go.
Coming up next, Heath Ledger in his best performance makes my list of the top 10 movies of the decade.
And on next week's show, we'll review one of the most anticipated movies of the year, James Cameron's Avatar, plus Daniel Day-Lewis, Penelope Cruz, and Kate Hudson singing and dancing in 9.
I better not kiss you.
No, don't kiss me. I might bite you.
We're continuing our countdown of the top 10 movies of the decade. So far, my picks are Million Dollar Baby, 25th Hour, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, 4 Months, 3 Weeks, and 2 Days, The Best of Youth, Where the Wild Things Are, and The Pianist. Now for my number 3 pick, Brokeback Mountain. Sometimes a movie's importance can blind you to its other qualities. In 2005, this film was hailed as a breakthrough for its honest depiction of love between men. Coming back to it a few years later, I was struck by the clarity of the storytelling, the sensitivity of the acting, and the sense of detail in Ang Lee's wonderful adaptation of the story by E. Annie Proulx.
If you can't fix it, Jack, you got a standard.
For how long?
As long as we can ride it. There ain't no reins on this one.
This movie will always be remembered, and rightly so, for Heath Ledger's magnificent performance as the taciturn, tormented Ennis Del Mar. But the rest of the cast, Jake Gyllenhaal, Michelle Williams, and Anne Hathaway, are every bit as good. Brokeback Mountain may look like a Western, but it's really the great weepy of our time. A swooning love story in the grand Hollywood tradition, rich with the kind of emotion that gives melodrama a good name. I just can't seem to quit this one.
It's a good film. I think it's a good film. I think Heath Ledger is so unbelievably good in it. And just for the last scene alone, the reunion with his daughter, yeah. I mean, that's the kind of screen acting you just don't get every generation. My decade's best list so far, Minority Report, Gosford Park, Mulholland Drive, United 93, Zodiac, E2 Mama Tambien, and Once. And my number 3 pick is Climates. Like the Irish movie Once, this film, which is certainly the least known of my top 10, is about a relationship that is not meant to be. This film is not warm and fuzzy like Once. It is, however, a singularly beautiful work. It was made by the Turkish writer-director Nuri Bilge Ceylan. It's about the end of a long-term affair between an Istanbul university professor and a television art director, and what happens after the end, which is the part most films leave out because it is so uncertain and messy. Early on, during their last vacation together, the woman dreams of happier times. That's Ceylan and his real-life wife, Ebru. Now, the dream, by the way, ends this way. And that's when she knows it's time to call it quits. I will never forget the impact this film had on me the first time I saw it. It's beautiful, and I'm glad this Decade Project is very simply about the films that meant the most to us personally. That's why I'm telling people to seek out this obscure Turkish import made by a genuine artist. I adore the film.
Yeah, good choice. And Ceylan is much better known around the world, and it's great to, just to remind Americans who tend to have their viewing dominated by Hollywood that there's a world beyond. This is just a lovely movie.
He's an artist.
Well done. So both Climates and Brokeback Mountain are available now on DVD, and you can go to our website to submit your vote for the best movie of the decade.
Coming up next, 2 Oscar winners take on tumultuous love stories. We'll review Penelope Cruz in Broken Embraces and Helen Mirren in The Last Station.
Well, no wonder I feel lonely. I'm surrounded by morons.
Excuse me, but we were saying that the girl in the ad looks exactly like you.
No, it's not me.
They had faces then. That's the usual line about Golden Age Hollywood. But we have a few faces now. Exhibit A, the new melodrama Broken Embraces. Pedro Almodovar's latest concerns a Madrid secretary who moonlights as a call girl and wants to be an actress. Her sugar daddy finances her big break in the movies, and the moment she auditions, her director, the real center of the story, falls in love. Why? Because the actress is played by Penelope Cruz.
Perdone que nos hayamos presentado así. Es que he oído que está haciendo pruebas para su próxima película.
Sí.
Y me encantaría que me probara. Si quiere puedo venir otro día.
No. Ya que está aquí, vamos a leer algo.
We first get to know the director, played by Luis Omar, in the present day after he's been blinded. Told you it was a melodrama, but it's a melodrama with a straight face and a mellow tone. The study in dual and triple identities may be a tick below Almodovar's best, which would include, for me, All About My Mother and Talk to Her and Volver, but Almodovar remains one of the most reliable stylists working today. Broken Embraces is a swank and pleasurable diversion, a movie in love with movies. I say see it.
I do too. I just love the work that Pedro Almodovar has done in this decade. I mean, every one of his movies, you kind of go back into his world, which is such an unusual place full of color and wonderful music and great feeling. So this movie is funny and lighthearted, but it's also very sad. It's about memory and loss and grief, and it looks amazing. I mean, there's some amazing landscape stuff. They go to this island in the Canary Islands. It's just breathtaking.
I think for people who are new to him, you know, if you go back to the Douglas Sirk movies like Written on the Wind, things like that from the 50s, Rock Hudson melodramas, that's kind of a reference point. But he's his own filmmaker. He really is, and he has such intelligence and such insight and such feeling. It's just a pleasure to watch this. Okay, next movie. If they gave out an Oscar for most acting in a motion picture, our next one would be a shoo-in. It's called The Last Station, and it tells the story of the great Russian novelist Leo Tolstoy's final days. Did I say tells the story? More like declaims, emotes, and shouts as a blue-chip cast attacks the scenery like pie-eating contestants at the county fair.
I have to sit here and listen to this talk of love and God and equality, knowing all the time full well that Count Generosity here is about to give away everything we own.
Now, why do you keep going on about this? Why do you think that we should profit from the work I'm doing now, which is only meant for the sake of the people?
Stop writing!
That's Christopher Plummer and Helen Mirren as the battling Tolstoys. Their marital strife is witnessed by James McAvoy, a young man named Valentine, and caused by Paul Giamatti as Chertkov, who's in a battle of wills with Mrs. Tolstoy over the contents of Mr. Tolstoy's will. There's a fascinating tale buried here amid all the mummery, but The Last Station, written and directed by Michael Hoffman, hits every cliche in the quality-lit playbook. Tolstoy tells his disciples to embrace life. I agree. But skip this movie.
Yes, I'm afraid so. Skip it. You know, despite, you know, I think the acting's a little less histrionic than you're leading on. I think Christopher Plummer, Helen Mirren are excellent, but you can only get so far in a vacuum, and it just feels like a lifeless costume drama.
Yes, it really does, or like a bad lecture in Russian literature class. Coming up next, Clint Eastwood's latest drama makes my 3 to see.
This is the time to build our nation.
Closed captioning for At the Movies is sponsored by Hotel provided by Park Hyatt Chicago, Chicago's award-winning hotel and luxury dining experience, located in the heart of Chicago's Magnificent Mile on Water Tower Square.
Spain, South Africa, and 1930s New York City, rugby, romance, and Shakespeare, all that and more in my 3 to see this week. Number 3 is Me and Orson Welles, a nifty little charmer that I hope doesn't get lost in the holiday movie rush. Zac Efron and Claire Danes pursue a tricky backstage romance, but the real showstopper is Christian McKay, playing the brilliant and megalomaniacal Orson Welles, a monstrous young maestro already in full command of his genius. Number 2 is Broken Embraces, a sad, exhilarating swirl of color and passion from the great Spanish director Pedro Almodovar. And at number 1, we did an early review last week. It's Clint Eastwood's Invictus.
You're risking your political capital. You're risking your future as our leader.
The day I am afraid to do that is the day I am no longer fit to lead.
With top-notch performances from Morgan Freeman and Matt Damon in a timely, inspiring story of rugby and national reconciliation in post-apartheid South Africa.
That's one of Eastwood's good ones. I think it doesn't have the commercial hooks that the real surefire, crowd-pleasing melodramas like Gran Torino or Million Dollar Baby have, but you know, in many ways I think it's a much better film.
I think it's a really good movie, and I think it's just a great movie about politics and a really interesting movie about rugby, too.
Yes, it is. Go to atthemoviestv.com for a web exclusive on the highs and lows of Clint Eastwood's career. Plus, more than 15,000 votes have already been counted. Now it's your turn to pick the best movie of the decade.
That's it for now. We'll leave you with a recap of this week's show. Join us next week when we'll reveal our number 2 picks for the top 10 movies of the decade. Plus, we'll have reviews of James Cameron's Avatar and Sarah Jessica Parker and Hugh Grant in Did You Hear About the Morgans? Until then, we'll be at the movies.
Treat yourself to holiday hotcakes at IHOP. With gingerbread, eggnog, or pecan pie pancakes. IHOP. Come hungry, leave happy. And treat someone special with a gift card.
I can speak to snakes.
The answers to the future are buried in the past.
Going back!
Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Buy the Blu-ray combo pack today.
The Nesquik Guide to Health and Happiness. Stay active. New 100-calorie Nesquik. Come to your happy place.
Your pets need year-round protection, plus medications for cold weather joint pain. Fortunately, they cost a lot less at 1-800-PET-MEDS. Call now or order online.